never imagined I'd be starting over at 45. When I signed those divorce papers a month ago, I felt an odd mix of relief and loneliness. For years, I had ignored the small signs, the quiet lies, the empty spaces between my husband and me. But when I found out about his visits to massage parlors, the betrayal felt sharp, final. So here I was, in a house that suddenly felt too big, too quiet. My son, Sam, was my only constant. 17 years ago, I held him for the first time. A tiny bundle wrapped in hospital blankets. His deep brown eyes looking up at me as if he had already known me forever. He was mine from the moment I saw him. Adoption paperwork and court dates didn't matter. He was my son. Now he was nearly a man. Tall, lean, with that restless energy of youth. His dark hair flopped over his forehead. His jawline growing sharper by the day. He was still my baby in so many ways, but every day he pulled further away, stepping into his own world. And lately, I had begun to notice the changes. Sam had always been protective of me, but after the divorce, something shifted. He lingered at home more, watching me with quiet concern when he thought I wasn't looking. He took out the trash without being asked, helped me carry groceries inside, even fixed a leaky faucet in the kitchen. "You don't have to do everything alone, Mom," he said one evening, his voice low and steady. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I know. But I'm used to it." I wasn't sure when it happened, but the house began to feel different. The silence was still there, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with small moments. Sam bringing me a cup of tea without asking, sitting beside me on the couch even if he didn't say much. His quiet presence filling the spaces my husband had left behind. One night, I found him in the living room, staring at his laptop. His face was tense, brows furrowed. "Everything okay?" I asked, walking over. He hesitated before shutting his laptop. "Yeah, just school stuff." I sat beside him, searching his face. "Sam, you know you can talk to me, right?" His lips pressed into a thin line before he let out a deep sigh. "It's just, I hate what he did to you." His hands curled into fists. "I don't get it. How could he throw everything away like that?" I exhaled, my heart aching for him. For both of us. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we don't have to let it define us." Sam looked at me then, something unreadable in his gaze. "You deserve better," he said quietly. Something about the way he said it made my throat tighten. The days stretched into weeks, and life found a new rhythm. Dinners were quieter but peaceful. We watched movies together, went on long walks, filled the house with music. But sometimes, late at night, when I sat alone in my room, I missed having a man's presence in the house. Not just someone to fix things or take care of bills, but a partner. A companion. One evening after a long day, I was curled up on the couch, rubbing my temples. A headache was forming behind my eyes. Sam walked in and frowned. "You okay?" "Just a long day," I murmured. Without a word, he moved behind the couch, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. I stiffened for a moment, surprised, but then as his fingers pressed gently into my tense muscles, I melted. "You're carrying too much stress," he said softly. I let out a breathy laugh. "Comes with the territory." His hands were firm yet careful, easing the tension from my shoulders. It had been so long since someone had touched me with care, with patience. My eyes fluttered shut. "Better?" he asked after a while. I turned slightly, looking up at him with a small, tired smile. "Yeah. Thank you, sweetheart." His lips curled upward, but there was something else in his expression, something I couldn't quite place. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I wasn't alone. Not really. Life had taken unexpected turns, and maybe I didn't have all the answers, but I had Sam. And for now, that was enough. That evening, Sam had told me he was going out with his friends and would be back late. I didn't question it. After all, he was 17 and he needed his space. I had spent so many years making sure he had a good home, a stable life, and the love he deserved. But tonight, as I sat alone in the living room, the quiet felt heavier than usual. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because I had gotten used to his presence, his energy filling the house. I distracted myself by cleaning up the kitchen, but my mind wandered. I thought about how much life had changed in the past month since the divorce. It still felt strange not having another adult in the house, someone to talk to in the late hours. Just as I was about to settle on the couch with a book, I heard the front door open. I frowned, glancing at the clock. He was supposed to be out for hours, but it had only been 40 minutes. "Sam!" I called out, stepping toward the hallway. And then I saw him. He was standing there in the doorway, slightly out of breath, his cheeks flushed from the crisp night air. But what shocked me the most was what he was holding, a huge bouquet of flowers in one arm and a neatly wrapped box with a satin bow in the other. My mouth fell open. What is all this? A slow smile spread across his face as he stepped forward, closing the door behind him. His eyes gleamed with excitement, but there was something else there too, something deeper, warmer. He extended the bouquet toward me, his voice steady yet affectionate. "This is my queen for you." I froze for a second, my heart skipping a beat. His words settled over me like a warm embrace, filling the room with something indescribable. I took the flowers, my fingers brushing against his. "Sam, this is beautiful. But why?" He said nothing, just set the gift box gently on the floor. "Open it," he urged, his voice softer now. "Carefully." My curiosity burned. Kneeling down, I carefully untied the ribbon, lifting the lid. Then, gasp. Inside, nestled in a cozy blanket, was a tiny golden Labrador puppy. Tears instantly welled in my eyes. My breath hitched, my chest tightening with emotion. I could barely believe what I was seeing. "Oh my God! Sam!" My voice broke as I lifted the puppy into my arms, feeling its tiny heartbeat against my chest. It was warm, soft, and so incredibly perfect. I had wanted a dog for as long as I could remember. Ever since I was a child, I had dreamed of having one, but life had always gotten in the way. First, it was my strict parents who never allowed pets, then marriage, then raising Sam, and then the weight of responsibilities. I had pushed that dream aside so many times, convinced that some things were simply not meant to be. But Sam remembered. I looked up at him, tears spilling onto my cheeks. You got this for me." He nodded, his smile growing wider. "Yeah. I remember you telling me once, ages ago, that you always wanted a Labrador. I figured it was time you had something that makes you happy." I let out a shaky laugh, holding the tiny puppy close. It nuzzled into my neck, already comfortable, already home. My heart felt so full it might burst. "I don't even know what to say," I whispered. "This is the sweetest thing anyone has ever done for me." Sam stepped closer, his expression growing serious. "You deserve it, Mom." His voice was firm yet tender. "You've spent your whole life taking care of me, putting everyone else first. I wanted to give you something that's just for you. Something to make you smile." I was speechless. And then, as if the moment wasn't already overwhelming enough, he wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't just a casual hug. It was strong, lingering, filled with something unspoken yet deeply felt. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I love you, Mom." My throat tightened. "I love you too, sweetheart." We stood there for a moment, the puppy squirming slightly in my arms but settling in as if it belonged there all along. Finally, I pulled back slightly, wiping the tears from my face. "What should we name her?" Sam grinned. "That's up to you. She's yours." I thought for a moment, looking down at the little golden fluff ball. "How about Daisy?" Sam chuckled. "Daisy. I like it." The rest of the night felt like a dream. We sat on the floor together, watching Daisy explore her new home, her tiny paws patting across the carpet. Sam kept stealing glances at me, as if making sure I was still happy, still glowing from the surprise. And I was. More than he could ever know. For the first time since the divorce, the house felt whole again. Not because a man was there, but because love was. And it had been all along. I sat on the living room floor, cross-legged, my heart still fluttering from the evening's surprise. Daisy, the tiny golden Labrador puppy, was bounding around my lap, her oversized paws making her stumble as she chased after the loose end of my sweater. I giggled, gently nudging her onto her back and rubbing her soft little belly. She let out a contented sigh, her pink tongue peeking out just a bit. I was so lost in the moment, in the warmth of this little creature in my arms, that I didn't notice at first. But when I looked up, Sam was watching me. He was leaning against the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, an unreadable expression on his face. At first I thought maybe I had something on my face, or maybe he was just zoning out. But his gaze didn't waver. It was deep, thoughtful, as if he was memorizing something important. A sudden shyness crept into my chest. "What?" I asked with a soft laugh, brushing my hair behind my ear. He blinked as if caught off guard and quickly shook his head. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. His eyes lingered, warm and focused. For a moment, there was just silence between us, except for the soft sounds of Daisy's tiny paws tapping against the floor as she tried to climb onto my lap again. Then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I've never seen you like this before." "Like what?" I asked, tilting my head. His voice was quiet but full of something deep. "Happy." My breath hitched. I opened my mouth to say something, to tell him I had been happy before, that he had made me happy plenty of times in life. But something about the way he said it made me pause. 'Cause he was right. It had been a long time since I had felt this kind of joy. Carefree, warm, loved. I looked down at Daisy, who had finally tired herself out and curled up against my leg. My fingers gently stroked over her soft fur, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her tiny breaths. Smiled. "I guess I am." Sam's gaze softened, and I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. Like he had done something right. Like this had been his mission all along. Without another word, he walked over and sat down beside me on the floor, his body close enough that our arms brushed lightly. For a moment, we both just sat there, watching Daisy sleep, the warmth of the little puppy spreading between us like a quiet fire. Then Sam chuckled softly. "What?" I asked, smiling at him. "She looks like a little baby," he said, gesturing toward Daisy's tiny, curled-up form. I laughed, realizing he was right. Her little paws were tucked against her chest, her body slightly twitching in a dream. She looked so small. "We should put her to bed properly," I whispered dramatically, as if afraid to wake her. Sam smirked. "Like a real baby." I grinned. "Exactly like a real baby." He nodded in agreement and stood up, stretching before heading toward the couch. I watched as he grabbed one of the soft throw blankets, his movements careful and precise, as if he were preparing for something truly important. I lifted Daisy gently, cradling her in my hands, and Sam carefully spread the blanket inside the little dog bed we had bought earlier that evening. When he was done, I knelt beside it, placing Daisy down as gently as I could. "Shoo!" I hushed playfully, tucking the sides of the blanket around her. Sam chuckled but joined in, kneeling beside me. "You're really taking this seriously, huh? Every baby deserves to be tucked in," I said with mock importance, pressing a soft kiss to the top of Daisy's tiny head. Sam rolled his eyes with a grin but reached out anyway, his large hand adjusting the edges of the blanket around her. Then, without thinking, I whispered, "Good night, sweetheart." I wasn't sure if I meant Daisy or Sam at that moment. The air between us grew quiet again. A warmth settled in my chest. I looked up at him, realizing how close we were. His face was just inches away, his expression softer than I had ever seen it before. His lips were slightly parted, his gaze still lingering on me. I swallowed, feeling the moment stretch between us. Sam exhaled slowly and leaned back, shaking his head with a smile. "You're ridiculous, you know that?" I let out a small laugh. "Maybe a little." He stood up, offering me a hand. Without thinking, I took it. His fingers curled around mine, warm, steady, strong. As he pulled me up, I stumbled just slightly, and for a brief second, my hands landed on his chest. A firm, steady heartbeat thumped beneath my palm. Sam stilled. I felt him inhale sharply. I quickly stepped back, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. Whoops. Guess I lost my balance. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Guess so. The air between us felt different. Like something had shifted, but neither of us knew how to name it. But before the moment could stretch any longer, Daisy let out a soft little whimper, shifting in her bed. We both laughed at the same time, breaking whatever spell had started to settle between us. She's already spoiled, I said, shaking my head. She deserves it, Sam replied. His voice still laced with quiet emotion. Then he added, so do you. I froze for a second, my chest tightening. Before I could respond, he turned toward the kitchen. I'm getting some water. Want anything? I swallowed, my heart still racing a little. No, I'm good. As I watched him disappear into the next room, I let out a slow breath, glancing back at Daisy's tiny, peaceful form. I had thought she was the only gift tonight. But maybe Sam had given me more than just a puppy. Maybe he had given me something I hadn't even realized I had lost. A home that felt full again. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Felt cherished. Felt seen. And I didn't know what to do with that. The days after Sam's surprise felt different. The house didn't feel quite so empty anymore. The quiet wasn't as sharp, as lonely. Every morning, Daisy's tiny paws padded across the floor, her excited little yips filling the air. She was always at my heels, and when she wasn't chasing her own tail, she was curled up on Sam's lap as he scrolled through his phone. Sam, he had changed too. Or maybe I was just noticing things I hadn't before. There was a new warmth in his eyes when he looked at me, a quiet protectiveness in the way he lingered near me in the evenings. Little things, small gestures that I had missed so much. Someone grabbing a plate for me before I could, someone making sure I didn't have to take out the trash, someone being there. One evening I was standing at the sink, washing dishes after dinner. My mind wandered, as it often did now, tracing over the moments that had started to shift something inside me. Sam walked in, barefoot, a glass of water in his hand. He leaned against the counter, watching me for a moment. You've been smiling more lately, he said casually. I glanced at him over my shoulder. Yeah. He nodded. Yeah. It's nice. I turned off the tap, drying my hands on a towel. I feel lighter, I guess. Sam set his glass down, his gaze never leaving me. You deserve to. The air felt warm, charged with something unspoken, but I brushed it off. Come on, I said, nudging him playfully. Let's take Daisy for a walk before bed. We slipped on our shoes, Daisy excitedly circling our feet as we stepped outside. The cool evening air wrapped around us, and for the first time in a long time I felt at peace. As we walked side by side, I glanced at Sam, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, I never had been. The night air was crisp as we walked along the quiet street, Daisy trotting happily between us. The stars above shimmered like tiny specks of silver, and the soft rustling of leaves filled the silence between us. It was peaceful, one of those rare moments where the world felt still, like it was holding its breath just for us. Sam walked close beside me, his hands tucked into his hoodie pockets. I could feel his presence, solid and steady, the same way he had been ever since my world turned upside down. For years, I had been the one taking care of him, guiding him, making sure he felt safe and loved. But lately, it felt like he had been the one taking care of me. You doing okay, Mom? He asked, breaking the silence. I glanced at him and smiled softly. Yeah, I think I am. He nodded, as if satisfied with my answer, and we continued walking. Daisy let out a happy little bark, tugging on her leash as she spotted something in the grass. I chuckled, bending down to scoop her up before she could chase whatever had caught her attention. You're a troublemaker, I whispered to her, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her tiny head. When I looked up, Sam was watching me again. Not just watching, studying. His gaze was warm, thoughtful, filled with something I couldn't quite place. What? I asked with a small laugh, adjusting Daisy in my arms. He shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. Nothing. I like seeing you happy. The words settled over me like a soft blanket. I swallowed, my heart swelling in my chest. That means a lot, sweetheart. When we got back home, we settled into the couch, Daisy curled up between us. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. Instead, we just sat there, wrapped in the comfort of each other's company. At some point, Sam shifted closer, resting his arm along the back of the couch. You know, he said after a while, I don't think I ever really thanked you. For what? For everything, he said simply. For giving me a home. For always being there. A lump formed in my throat. You don't have to thank me for that, I whispered. You're my son, Sam. Loving you has always been the easiest thing in the world. He smiled, a soft, almost vulnerable look in his eyes. And then, without a word, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. It was brief, warm, filled with quiet affection. A simple gesture, but one that made my heart ache in the best way. Love you, Mom, he murmured, leaning back against the couch. I reached over, squeezing his hand. I love you too, sweetheart. And for the first time in a long time I felt whole. I wasn't alone. I was home.